Welcome everyone to this Wednesday edition. Back in the saddle again.
That's right.
I'm back. We're back. It's Wednesday, midpoint of the week. Dominic, we have passed the two worst days of the week. We're at the home stretch. We're at the halfway point to the weekend. Yes. Cheers to the freaking weekend. Drink to that. Yeah. So, Dominic, how are you feeling on this beautiful, bright Wednesday evening?
Yeah, it's a really good hump day, man. I'm excited to be back here with a roundtable. We love these. We love just having an open discussion, scouring the internet for questions. We've got 10 more good ones here today, and I'm very excited. It's been a good week so far. I hope it's going to finish off as a good week. Noah, how's your week been so far?
I have a bone to pick with you, actually, because I've already been struggling with the fact that I'm so washed up and old. And, I'm just a shell of the man I used to be at this point.
Yeah.
I was talking to someone at work the other day. I don't know why I said the other day. It was today. And I said the words hump day, and they were like, who the hell says hump day anymore? And I was like, oh, really? I'm like, I feel like I still hear it a lot. And in my head, immediately, I heard your southern drawl saying hump day over and over again. And she's like, yeah, maybe in 2012. And I was like, oh my God. I said, so you're kind of on my shit list right now because you have dated me. You have made me older by association. I have gotten so used to you saying that every fucking Wednesday that we sit here.
Yeah.
And because of that, I'm somehow less cool. I'm not cool, even less so than I was before, and that's your fault.
Well, and in the words of Nick Saban, I'm not going to stop doing it, so quit asking, baby. It's hump day. It's roundtable day. But, for what it's worth, no, you are older than me, too.
This is true.
You got grays growing. That's why the hat is on.
This is true. Listen, I was already, I was the old guy at college. Nobody wanted to eat lunch with me. They thought they basically were pushing me around in my wheelchair. Like, come on, old man, let's.
Well, in your case in college, the crutches actually. If you don't know, it's a thing.
Is it? What am I missing on that? What am I missing with that reference?
I guess you never did get the crutches, actually.
Are you talking about when I busted my ankle playing basketball?
Definitely am, but we didn't get crutches, did we?
You know what? Let's talk about that story because that's a pretty good one. So, I swear, every story that we talk about from our freshman year, we didn't realize it at the time, but it just makes us sound like the biggest freshmen.
Oh yeah, big time
in the world.
Yeah.
So me, Dominic, and our friend Nick, who all went to Bowling Green together, we went to the gym, the campus rec center.
Yeah.
And afterwards, one of the things that we always liked to do at the time was shoot around, shoot a little hoops. Yeah. Usually, we would just shoot around amongst ourselves just to try to get a little cardio in. We like playing a little basketball. Why not?
Yep.
This day was different, though.
That's true.
We had the court, and then some guys came up, and they're like, y'all want to play fives? And at first I was like, I don't know. But I could tell Dominic and Nick wanted to. Yes, I'm going to blame you guys for this happening.
Fair enough.
So I was like, yeah, okay, we can play. So then we're going, I'm fucking playing like garbage. I mean, I've never been good at basketball. But at least, I've always felt like I was at least, competent. I knew how the game worked.
Yes.
A lot of people just look like fucking baby deers out there trying to do anything with the basketball.
Yes. You didn't look like that. No.
Yeah.
None of that.
But then I had my moment to shine. I get a fast break pass from Dom, and I go up for the layup, miss the wide open layup, and then on the way down, my right ankle just kind of rolls.
Oof.
And I drop sack of potatoes. Big guy. A thud.
Game stops.
A massive thud. Everybody stops.
Everybody's huddled around.
It's like the saloon in the 1800s where the music stops.
Yeah, everyone in the gym that was working out stopped.
Yeah, like you got the guy playing the piano on the side. He's just like stops.
Yeah.
Everybody's staring at me, and I am fucking in pain. So I kind of just try to force my way back up and like off to the side while they keep going. And I could just tell them like this hurts.
Yeah.
And they played for a little bit longer, but because I was hurt, like eventually we were like, all right, let's go. So we all three walked back, and luckily our dorm was very close to the rec center. But I had to hobble, I was limping bad, and Nick's like talking shit to me the whole time. He's like, dude, he's like, walk normal. He's like, you quit being a baby.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, dude, I think I broke my ankle. Like, I think I'm walking on a broken ankle right now. So go back to the room, what we do to post-workout routine, Dominic. I got a half gallon of chocolate milk.
It still blows my mind to the day.
I would drink a half gallon of chocolate milk after every
and he'd be miserable every time.
I would do it in the shower, and then I would take it. And then afterwards, we'd be in our room, and I would just lay there and be like, "Oh, Dom, I shouldn't have done that."
I'm like, dude, I told you not to do this.
So no wonder I'm the size I am, right? But anyways, I wake up the next morning because I had like a 8:30 class, and my shit was a balloon.
It was a balloon. Yes.
And literally, actually in the middle of the night, I think I woke up to use the bathroom. Could not walk on it like at all. Like had to hop to the bathroom to piss.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, I think I really did something. So finally, I kind of, Dom wakes up. I'm like, I can't go to class. I message my professors. I'm like, I'm just not going to go to class all day, I guess.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Dominic, can you go down to the front desk and ask them if they have crutches? Because I didn't want to make him go to get his car from the parking lot and drive me to the Falcon Health Center.
Because the parking lot is in another county.
I mean, this is the winter. This is around this time of year, it's cold. And I also was just nervous I wasn't even going to be able to make it to his car because I was going to have to hop the whole way. Couldn't walk. So I asked him to go down there and ask if he could get crutches. He did, begrudgingly. And they said, come again?
I wish I could remember what they actually said.
But I'm sure they were like, no, we don't have crutches for you to check out.
Yeah, and then as I left, I can only imagine the conversations that were had.
So,
especially as I walked away fine, no need for me to have crutches.
I did the smart thing that what anybody would do in this situation. I didn't do anything. I basically didn't walk for 3 days.
Yes.
I remember I think your dad or grandpa came to visit, yelled at me for not having my foot propped up. Yeah. So then I put my foot up. And then 3 days go by, and it just kind of, and then I started walking again.
It's a miracle, quite frankly.
I am like Bo Jackson. I mean,
because Noah's had his run in the mill with ankle injuries, but that's the college edition.
Nick and ankle injuries with me are just a tangled web. But that's a story for another time, because you guys came here for a Reddit Roundtable. Thank you for going on that little journey down memory lane. But for those of you, if this is your first time tuning in to a Reddit Roundtable or you just need a refresher, basically we've scoured the web. Me and Dominic, we're taking a lot of shots out here, man.
Yes.
I mean, we're looking for the questions that you fans, that the community wants to know the answers to. And we got to dodge a lot of shit to find these questions. Because we're looking at Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Problem is, there's a lot of terrible stuff on these websites. But that's why you got to look for the needle in the haystack, the gold in the pile of shit. And we got 10 questions here.
That's right.
All MMA related.
Of course.
But some are going to be a little topical, some about fighters that are relevant right now. Mm-hmm. And some not so relevant. Yeah. So, Dominic, Do you have anything to say before we get started?
Without further ado, I think it's time for question number 1.
So number one's a fight that I'm really surprised hasn't been announced yet. And
True.
it's a really big fight at welterweight. Khamzat Chimaev versus Gilbert Burns, Dominic. A fight that's been rumored. Will we get it? Will it be the co-main event of like UFC 262? No, 272.
72. Yeah, 72.
Will it be, a fight on one of those cards over the summer? This is the fight that it feels like it's going to happen. But Dominic, we recently started doing a lot of sports betting. So because of that, we've been analyzing the odds a lot recently.
Of course.
So my question for you is, if you were an odds maker, where would you put the lines right now for Khamzat Chimaev versus Gilbert Burns?
I can't help but make Khamzat Chimaev the favorite, man. I can't
but
help
by
it.
how much?
Of course. See, part of me, when I first saw the question on the Google Doc, I'm like, do I go all the way to minus 200? 2-1. I know. And I'm like, Gilbert Burns, he's a legitimate threat. He almost took out Kamaru Usman. He just had a great performance against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in his last showing. But so I'm going to place it around Khamzat Chimaev. Minus 150, and maybe Gilbert Burns comes back around a plus 125, plus 130. I still have to make Khamzat Chimaev the favorite, man. I can't help it. I probably shouldn't, but damn it, he showed me no other way than to make him a favorite, even against the number 1 or number 2 guy, Gilbert Burns.
See, I got to take my own beliefs out of this. I got to go by, because really, these odds, they're not based on what the person setting them thinks.
Yeah, that's true.
At the end of the day, it's based on what is moving. Where's the money going, right? And obviously, Khamzat has so much hype right now.
Yes.
And even the casual fans are picking up on what this guy is capable of. So much so that he will be a favorite, I think, if odds were to be released today. Or I guess if the fight were to become official. I'm sure there's odds out there somewhere. But I'm not going to go quite as high as you. I think Gilbert Burns, being that he is so highly ranked, being that a lot of people I don't think remember how close he really was to becoming welterweight champion.
Yeah.
But I think he's still known to be a very dangerous opponent, a very relevant welterweight, a title contender. So I'm going to go like minus 120 for Khamzat.
Okay.
And then I guess it would be like a plus 110.
Yeah, he'd be close to even.
So you're getting close to like a pick 'em, but I could totally see it starting that way. And then depending on what happens towards fight week, I could see Khamzat just like separating himself to where he closes at like a minus 140, minus 145. But I mean, that's tough to do, man, because Gilbert Burns is like the number 2 ranked guy in the world, and
he's a stud.
Yeah, and Khamzat. I mean, again, I don't know if you can't say, like, you really can't. The string of performances he's had, you can't say anything. But this is a big jump up. It just is.
Of course.
Li Jingliang is great, but Gilbert Burns is, legit, and he's a threat in kind of where Khamzat might want to take that fight.
Yes.
I actually think that might be a fight where Khamzat looks to keep it standing, if I'm being honest.
And even on the feet, Burns is not a slouch on the feet.
No, he's not at all. Not at all.
But we just need that fight to be announced, if I'm being honest. I'm sick of seeing him tweet back and forth. I'm like, damn, guys, what's going on here?
Yeah, come on, guys.
Anyway.
Number 2. So, Dominic, let's just, take the question off the screen.
Oh.
Wait till I ask the question and then put it on the screen.
Then put it on the screen.
Yeah. Just a little.
For those that are new to the roundtable, this is a new portion, so bear with us.
So this is about one of the greats for the men's heavyweight division, as if there's another in the UFC. But someone who's it seems like he was, when I first started watching, he was kind of looked at as like perhaps the best of all time in that division.
Yeah.
But as we've gotten further away from 2016 when I started watching, he's become less and less talked about in terms of the best of all time at heavyweight. And that's going to be Cain Velasquez, Dominic.
Yeah.
So the question is, despite being a 2-time champion and considered one of the best heavyweights in UFC history. Was Cain Velasquez's career a disappointment?
You're asking the tough questions today, Noah, huh? Disappointment's such a strong, ugly word. And, his performances, at least pre-injury, he was an absolute stud, an animal. Had beaten everyone, had the title defense record. I think it was 2 for him because Stipe broke it and made it 3. And that's a fight that we never even got to see, which would have been awesome in its own right. But was his career a disappointment? I think it's disappointing that we didn't get to see him in his prime longer because of those injuries that just plagued his career. So, I guess you do say it's a disappointment, but it's not to his detriment. You know what I mean? That's where it's kind of like a slippery slope.
You could say that. You could say it's a disappointment. It's not his fault that it was a disappointment.
Right.
Is what you're getting at. Because
Exactly.
you're focused on the injury side, which is what most people, I think, would go to. So you're saying a disappointing career considering how good he could have been if he stayed healthy.
Yeah, exactly. You can only imagine what he could have potentially went on to do had he stayed healthy for a prolonged amount of time. Again, already had that title defense record at that moment when he was the champ. And obviously, post-injuries, we really just kind of saw him go downhill and had these long layoffs in between fights. So, yeah, I will definitely lean toward disappointment because of those injuries.
Yeah, I agree. I would lean disappointment as well, but I actually think it goes further than just the injuries. While the injuries definitely suck because he probably could have fought. He may still be fighting if he didn't have the just injury, like severe injury after severe injury to the point where he was out multiple years at a time. But Dominic, I actually think the bigger reason why it's disappointing, those 2 title fight losses are very memorable.
Mm-hmm.
Very memorable. Now, Junior Dos Santos, another all-time heavyweight, and Fabricio Verdum, another, especially if you go by MMA standards, if you're evaluating all organizations, one of the best heavyweights of all time. But both of those were such dramatic losses, such emphatic losses.
Mm-hmm.
You got, the big stage, and for Cain, both times, to not allow his body to adapt to fighting at, what do you call that?
Altitude.
Yeah, fighting at altitude. So the first card, the first Fox card, they did the 1-fight main event, heavyweight title on the line, Cain Velasquez versus Junior Dos Santos. JDS knocked him out in just over a minute. And the broadcast was not prepared for that. They literally had 1 fight on this shown on Fox that night.
Yeah.
So then basically the commentators and the broadcast team had to just talk for the next hour.
Mm-hmm.
Not a great kickoff to the Fox era, even though the Fox era would end up going on to much better things. Tough debut. But then he comes back. He has those 2 wins over JDS, just dominates him both times.
Yes.
And highly underrated performances against Bigfoot Silva. Just beat the shit out of him both times. Yeah. But then he goes up against Fabricio Verdum, and this one's in Mexico City.
Yes.
Again, I know Brandon Moreno got the credit for being the first Mexican-born champion. Cain Velasquez was the first champion of Mexican heritage or of Mexican descent, but did not, he wasn't born in Mexico.
Yeah.
But they still saw an opportunity to perhaps cash in on that market.
100%.
Mexico has been dominated by boxing for so long. So they saw an opportunity. Mexico City, heavyweight title on the line, Cain Velasquez versus Fabricio Verdum. And again, Mexico City at altitude. Yep. And Cain looked sluggish, and Fabricio looked fantastic and beat him with another emphatic win. So those 2 losses, man, the stage was so big for both of those, and the potential payoff if Cain were to win either one of those could have been huge for his long-term future. Now I know the injuries probably would have cut the legs off of that, but it's got to be a little bit disappointing because
Right.
when he was at his best, he might be like peak performance, the best heavyweight of all time. I mean, I've never seen someone dominate and have the cardio and the skill set that Cain Velasquez had. I mean,
when he won fights, he dismantled his opponents.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's got to be disappointing. Obviously, the injuries aren't his fault. Like that, your body just sometimes can't hold up. He's got the wrestling heavy background. You know, wrestlers, their bodies break down, man.
Mm-hmm.
But those 2 losses, I mean, that's the reason he didn't. He should have been the guy to break that record or have that record for heavyweight title defenses. I mean, he really should have been. And instead, he came up short both times when it was at the biggest stage and the most on the line for him. And, I mean, that's got to be disappointing.
Amen.
Number 3, another heavyweight, Dominic. Francis Ngannou. He defended his heavyweight title at UFC 270 against Israel Adesanya. And while the future is very iffy on Francis Ngannou, I did think it'd be interesting to look at the potential matchup we may see in the future between Ngannou and Jon Jones. So the question, Dominic, is, did Francis Ngannou's performance at UFC 270 help or hurt his chances versus Jon Jones in your eyes?
That's a tough one. That's so tough on so many different levels because we are still just awaiting to see Jon Jones at heavyweight in general. But you would think...
Let's start here. Sorry, not to cut you off.
No.
Before the fight with Ciryl Gane, were you leaning Ngannou or Jones if they were matched up at the time?
Ooh. Man, I don't even remember having to think about it, but I would have to imagine Dom would have been leaning Francis Ngannou. Not heavily because it is Jon Jones, but yes, I think I would have leaned Francis. And I know that he was like a betting favorite going into that fight too, when they do like the predicting odds or whatever.
So I think I would have probably leaned Jones. I don't know for sure, but it's possible I would have picked I don't know. You're right. It is kind of hard to remember. But, okay, now you take into account the performance you saw. You know, there's a lot you could take away from it. Yes, we saw more of Ngannou's full game, and that was impressive. But there were some still holes in the fight. It wasn't just like A+ performance, I don't think. That's... Yeah. But, of course, you have the added element. The dude fought on a torn MCL, damaged every CL in the legs and the knees. Yeah. So you kind of get a pass. But overall, did that fight say, oh, wow, he really is the guy to beat Jon Jones? Or are you still kind of like, man, I didn't see it there?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you just can't. You simply can never count out Jon Jones. He's one of the greatest mixed martial artists we've ever seen. You know, and on the feet, for example, if it's Francis versus Jon, obviously the power is going to be in Francis's advantage. We realize this. But, you know, Ciryl Gane was able to evade that power. And again, we know Francis was on the hurt knee, so take with that what you will. But still, Ciryl Gane, being a world-class striker that he is, was able to win 2 rounds when it was on the feet and never really faced any adversity there. I'm not saying Jon Jones is as crisp and technical of a striker as Ciryl Gane, but his fight IQ when he's on the feet and to use his reach is some of the best that we've ever seen. And for that reason, I think he can keep Francis at bay. And then in the grappling, first off, I don't think Francis is going to be able to just take Jon Jones down as easy as he did Ciryl Gane. And even if he does get Jon down, Jon Jones is an incredible wrestler. I think a lot of people don't really think that when they like see Jon Jones, they just like view him as this amazing fighter overall. But he's a phenomenal grappler.
Out-wrestled Daniel Cormier.
Yes, exactly. Who was on the Olympic trials for what it's worth. So even if Francis was able to get Jon down, I think Jon can get back up. I think Jon can use offensive wrestling against Francis even better than what Stipe did in their first fight. So yeah, it definitely didn't help his chances at all. I think it did hurt, in my opinion, going into that fight, and then where it is now, Jon Jones has slowly closed that gap.
See, that's very interesting. I'm actually surprised you went that way because I figured you would have been very heavy on the Ngannou side, but I actually think I might be the opposite, and I was surprised that I thought that way as well. So I'm kind of I figured our answers would be flip-flopped here, but I actually think this performance and overall my takeaways improved Ngannou's chances a lot. Because again, before the fight, again, I think it was leaning Jones, but could have been 50-50 for all I know. Could have been leaning Ngannou. But now I think Jones does not want to fight Ngannou right now because here's why. And I know you're right. Jones is a far better wrestler than Ciryl Gane is right now. Even though, let's not forget, we were given a lot of compliments to Ciryl Gane's ground game before the fight. And I still think Ciryl Gane is a very talented grappler, just not as well versed on his back. I think that's what's clear.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest reason why Ngannou had so much success, yes, he did have some sprawling ability and definitely looked much improved in sort of his IQ of the ground game. But it was his strength and power to slam Ciryl Gane, to hold him down, that really won him those rounds.
Yeah.
And Jon Jones, no matter how big he gets, he is still going to be a smaller heavyweight. So it's all about, if Ngannou gets his hands on Jones, I think he's going for a ride.
Yeah.
Now, it's easier said than done because, again, nobody's ever been able to do it to Jon Jones. But if there's a guy who can do it at heavyweight, I really think Ngannou is the guy. And I still think there's the potential that Ngannou has the power to put Jon Jones away. I mean,
which is so hard to imagine Jon getting finished.
It is, and maybe for all I know, maybe Jon Jones has a granite chin. But again, you have a guy who is so accustomed to a 205-pound body, a 205-pound frame, fighting the power, speed, strength of a 205-pounder.
Yeah.
And now you're going up against literally a human specimen. And
yeah.
I'm not saying that it's a blowout, not by any means, because Jon Jones is, in my opinion, the best MMA fighter of all time. And because of that, anything's possible there. But there's a lot. This performance for Ngannou, considering I kind of give him some slack for the knee injury, I was very impressed overall at the well-roundedness of his game. And I think the strength and power of his grappling is really going to be a problem if those two ever fight.
Yeah, and I mean, this question could be a whole nother ball game later in the year because, like we talked about on Monday, Jon Jones and Stipe might be fighting in the meantime for an interim championship. So when we actually get to see Jon Jones step in at heavyweight, because I do think we're going to see him in there once before if he faces Francis, I think he'll still fight before then. So if that is Stipe, we'll get to see Jon Jones in a heavyweight frame. We'll get to see what he looks like for 5 rounds, how he can fare against a guy who's in Stipe is super well-rounded as well. So again, this is going to be, we can have this entire different discussion on another roundtable later.
That's really true.
Our opinions could differ again.
Yeah, that's very true. We probably will have that same discussion. Number 4. So Amanda Nunes got announced as one of the coaches of The Ultimate Fighter Season 30. Dominic's going to be tuning in.
I will. Noah will not.
But Amanda Nunes, women's GOAT. However, Dominic, it's been a well-known topic on this podcast. My inability to just handle the fact that Amanda Nunes lost in the fashion she did. So I saw this question brought up, and I immediately was like, what question's number 4? Take it out. I'm putting this in here because I hadn't thought of this, but we need to talk about it. So even though the rematch is booked and whatever, what I thought, a little bit of background on this question. So before this title fight with Juliana Pena, Amanda Nunes had not fought at bantamweight since the end of 2019 against Jermaine Durandamy.
Yep.
So the question is, Dominic, is 135 pounds at this point too much of a cut for Amanda Nunes to still fight at her best?
I don't think so. I didn't watch that fight against Juliana and think, bad weight cut for Amanda. She's just not the same out there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was, for me anyway, it was a mixture of obviously Juliana just implementing a game plan that Amanda wasn't used to, pressing forward, eating shots, stalking her down. And Amanda did gas, and she just kind of wilted, if you will, under the pressure of Juliana en route to that submission in the second round. But, even during the fight week, even during weigh-ins, Amanda still looked like Amanda. I didn't think it looked like a bad weight cut. She looked lean. She didn't look bad on the scale. She looked good on fight night, and she was still a much bigger woman than Juliana on fight night. So to me, I don't think it's too much. I still think that, Amanda, if she fights Juliana for that rematch, wins the belt, we could very well see her fight again at 135 pounds. That wasn't the biggest outlier for me.
I will just say, and I do agree, I don't think that that's really where I lean to, where I point to and go, oh, that's why she looked so sluggish.
Mm-hmm.
But you do compare the girl or the woman who won the belt at UFC 200, the frame, versus how she's looked beating Chris Cyborg and Felicia Spencer. She is huge nowadays.
Yeah.
Like, she just looks so much bigger and stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So it is kind of, I mean, I bet it is a bit of a cut for her nowadays. While back when she first won the belt, I bet it wasn't all that hard. So maybe it is, but I don't think that's really where I lean on this one. I think 135 pounds is still makeable for her and makeable without having to compromise her ability. I just think that there might, I don't know what was at play. I'm still not sure what happened in that fight. I don't think I ever will.
Right.
I don't think the weight cut is responsible. Let's put it that way.
No.
Number 5.
Oh, boy.
So Dominic, we made the decision to buy some pretty expensive tickets for a card on March 26th in UFC Columbus. Mm-hmm. However, after buying said tickets, we lost our main event.
That's fun.
Jan Blachowicz versus Alexander Rakic off the card. So that's opened up a spot for this main event. And now, right here, right now, we're going to rebook the main event for UFC Columbus. What do you got?
Well, I tweeted it, made it public. It's out there for the world to see, so I have to bring it up here on the podcast as well. I don't know if I was just in the mood for light heavyweights or what, but, 205 pounds. I was trying to think of some people that haven't fought in a while in a matchup that made sense, and bam, there was one that came to mind. It was Mr. Anthony Smith riding that 3-fight win streak right now to take on Mr. Dominic Reyes, who is on a bit of a skid, but has been in there for the title, fought Jon Jones, then fought for the vacant belt against Jan Blachowicz, where he lost. I think that's a great fight that makes sense as Anthony Smith is trying to work his way back into title talks for Dominic Reyes to get a guy like Anthony to potentially rebound and keep himself in that contender area. And it's just a banger of a fight. I think they have two really good complementary styles of one another. They're always in fun fights, and I think those two together would be a great main event. Anthony Smith, as we know, we've talked about it on here, the king of fight night main events as well, and I'd love to see him in person. So, I don't know. Maybe I was just in the mood to keep the light heavyweight kind of agenda going for that card, so that was the one I made.
I love that fight. I really do at this point. Where both guys stand currently, it makes all the sense in the world. That would be an awesome main event for that Columbus card. I went with the fight in the bantamweight division, Dominic. And this goes back to kind of my mentality when these fight night main events get booked. Like, what are we looking for here? Like, when a fight night main event gets booked, I always look for, like, why is this the 5-round main event fight? Like, what is to be answered here? What is the UFC looking to figure out about either one of these two fighters or both fighters? And this is the fight that I think could answer questions about both, because it would be the first main event slot for either man. Bantamweight division, Merab Dvalishvili versus Marlon Chito Vera.
Ooh, interesting.
So a little low-key, a little less of probably eyes on it than Anthony Smith, Dominic Reyes. But there's so many ranked fighters on this card. It's already looking very filled out as a whole that I don't necessarily think you have to go all in with like a real big main event.
It doesn't have to be too top heavy.
Not that Anthony Smith and Dominic Reyes is like the biggest main event, but it's a very solid one. And Merab and Vera are both unproven in terms of any sort of star power or can they really carry a card. But there's just so much talent on this card. You got a great co-main event, Kai France and Askar Askarov. So I think that you could afford to do something like this. And again, these are two guys who are making a lot of noise, who are putting up some fantastic performances, come from behind wins. Marab, Marlon Vera with the front kick to the face to Frankie
Brutal.
Edgar.
Yeah.
One of these guys is going to separate themselves here and show that they're ready for the big time. Because really, as great of a division as bantamweight is, Dominic, we kind of need one of these guys to step up this year because Jan and Sterling are going to fight, and that's going to kind of clear that up. Sandhagen's lost to the top 3 guys in the division, and we don't know when TJ Dillashaw is going to be back.
Yeah.
And then you got the potential of Henry Cejudo kind of floating around. But because of that, I mean, one of these guys with the win could say, hey, Peter Yan, I'm next.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I just have to bring this up, not to be a Debbie Downer, but no, here we are sitting at February 9th. Still nothing announced, no whimpers, no rumors. So we're slowly approaching that March 26th date. Now, when we lost that main event, I kind of said I was trying to be as optimistic as I could in our group chats, right? Because we all have the
Dominic
tickets to it.
always does.
Yes. And so I'm like, you know what? Listen, if we're going to lose the main event, at least it happened 2 months out. You got 8 weeks. That's basically a training camp. We got time. We can salvage this. But here we are now on February 9th. We're getting closer and closer. So now I'm just going to cap this kind of portion off by simply asking, we can match make and say what we want to be the main event all we want. Are we going to get a new main event, or will that co-main that we just discussed just kind of get bumped up?
I think
if you had to pick,
I think
we get a new main event.
I know it's, the clock is ticking, but I'm not saying right now, I don't think that there's like anything pen to paper for a main event.
Yeah.
But let's be clear that yes, these guys will sign on, the fight will get announced later and it'll feel like, oh, they don't have a ton of time to prepare, but they'll probably already have known they were taking that fight for
there's something going on
a week or two before. So that's why I'm kind of I think we're still going to get a new main event. The UFC, even less than us, valued that flyweight division. And when I say even less, I mean, we love the flyweights.
Yes.
But I'm not necessarily loving the idea of Askarov, Cara France as the main event. It's kind of I mean, it's a good fight. I'm excited for it, but I'm it's the main event, really? But I think the UFC, even less than us, they never valued their flyweights this highly.
Right.
Again, I think I told you this when we kind of talked about this previously. Besides Davison last year, I don't know if there was another flyweight who headlined a card. Him and Benavidez headlined 2 fight nights. And obviously Davison had back-to-back pay-per-views where he was the headliner. But I don't think anybody else flyweight headlined a card last year.
Right. And those were all title fights too, by the way. And this one obviously is not a title fight. So that kind of adds.
I mean, I guess that kind of makes it even worse that it was on a fight night because it's a title fight and they put it on a fight night. So
yeah, exactly.
Again, I think this division is in a good spot. I'm just saying I don't think the UFC still look at it like, oh, we're gonna put a lot of resources into making this a main event for a pretty big fight night. All in all,
touche.
Well, do you feel differently? Because
I do think I didn't answer my own question. I think there will be, but I can't help but get more and more nervous as each passing day goes on. But yes, and again, it might not be either of ours. I think we're pretty damn good matchmakers. I think they're both great. But for now, I'm still going with yes. We'll get a new main event.
All right. Number 6. Here's a former bantamweight champion, a former flyweight champion who's been making a lot of headlines. Triple C, Henry Cejudo, looking to become quadruple C. Is that what he's calling it? What is he calling it?
I think he already kind of called himself that because he coached Davison to a title win. So shit, if he wins the next one, he might be pentagonal champion. I don't even know. I think a pentagon has 5 sides.
The nickname needs some work, but Triple C, as I know him, he's been talking up a comeback. We were perhaps looking at him filling in that Max Holloway spot against Volkanovski, which ended up going into Korean Zombie. But then we had this kind of bit of news that came out that kind of got it kind of got proven to maybe not be true, where we thought Cejudo might have been back in the USADA testing pool, and then that, I guess, wasn't true. But there's a lot of interest in him coming back. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
So, Dominic, if he were to come back, which fight do you prefer to see him in his comeback? Fighting the winner of Petr Yan Aljamain Sterling, or fighting the winner of Alexander Volkanovski and the Korean Zombie? Obviously, one for the bantamweight title, one for the featherweight title.
No, I can't help but get interested in potentially seeing the first ever 3-division UFC champion. I gotta go. I'm more intrigued in Henry Cejudo facing the winner of Volkanovski, Korean Zombie. I know that may sound crazy, people, but we've talked endless about the potential matchup between Volk and Cejudo specifically. And I know it's a little weird to think, well, if Zombie wins, him and Henry Cejudo, that's just weird. I can't even picture that in my head in the octagon. But it's that possibility to witness history for me, and to see someone win 3 belts in the UFC is unprecedented. And what other guy to try and do it than Mr. Henry Cejudo? I mean, shit, he's got an Olympic gold medal, 2 belts from the UFC, defended both of those belts. And I know he looks pretty thick these days too, so he'd probably fill out 145 well, just not the height size. But yeah, I'm gonna go him at featherweight, man, simply for that historic factor of the possibility of a 3-belt victory.
I really struggle with this one because on one hand, I love the idea of the history and him and Volkanovski especially. Like, let's be honest, we're really saying, do you rather see him fight Petr Yan or Alexander Volkanovski? Not because the two guys they're fighting, like, not saying they don't have a chance, but I'm saying it because those are the 2 matchups that are the most intriguing right now for him, I think. Yeah. So it's kind of, the assumption is if either of those guys win and hold or win their title back, who would you rather see him fight? As far as the fight, Petr Yan, Henry Cejudo.
That's a hell of a matchup.
Give me Petr Yan. I think is the best fighter in the UFC pound for pound. I've said that, like, most talented. Yeah. Obviously, Kamaru Usman, is the best in terms of what he's done, but Petr Yan, I think, is like the most talented guy pound for pound in the UFC. So I salivate at the idea of Yan fighting Sterling, and then if he were to win the fight TJ Dillashaw, win that fight Henry Cejudo. What a year that could be. And it's not out of the realm of possibility to beat 3 bantamweight champions in a year.
Yeah.
That's got to be like fighter of the year. I mean, you're talking legacy, all-time status right there. And I can't help but like look at that, and I kind of want Petr Yan to have that kind of opportunity. Which one do I pick though? Because I love both. I'll go with Cejudo Volkanovski. Even though I just said all that, people might be surprised, but even though the fight between Yan and Cejudo, I think, is a little more interesting, the reason why Cejudo Volkanovski matters so much is because of, obviously, history on the line. And really, I think it's such a tough fight for Henry that I'm just going to tune in to be like, can he really pull this off?
Right.
In a division that clearly he is not meant for. And I like that I think he would defend that belt if he were to win it.
Yeah, I think he would too.
And I mean,
100%.
Again, Volkanovski's so talented, but he's like the only guy that feels like could fight Henry at featherweight because they're at least similarly statured.
Yeah.
But it's going to be really weird if Henry goes and fights like Korean Zombie.
Max Holloway or Korean Zombie.
What the hell? So I definitely think that, for Henry, for it to really feel like a big history-making moment, you got to defend that belt. But, I either one I'm like all on board with, but I'll side with the Volkanovski fight just by a hair.
Yeah, and honestly too, for me, like the biggest thing that outside of obviously the biggest pro I kind of mentioned was the history thing, but the con in terms of like for the bantamweight option, I just want to see that division play out. That division is on fire right now. They had such a massive year, and all these guys are just constantly pressing forward into the title contention talks. I mean, you've got these two that have to clear their history, Yan and Sterling. You've got TJ Dillashaw, Dillashaw sitting there. You've got Merab Dvalishvili who's pushing his way up. You still have Corey Sandhagen who's in there. Dominic Cruz is still winning fights. That division is just unreal right now, and I just want to see all of it play out in 2022.
I agree, but yet I do kind of look at that top of the division, and I think there's potential that we're going to get a bit of what we have at welterweight right now, where if Jan beats Sterling, he will have beat Sterling and Sandhagen. If he fights Dillashaw and beats him, one of those guys behind him, he's already beat Aldo as well, who's surging right now.
Yeah.
So then you have guys like Rob Font, who took a tough loss to Aldo. Yeah. And then after that's when you get to Cheeto Vera.
Yeah.
But again, Jan Cejudo is awesome, but I just think there's a chance you run into. I think Jan has the potential to be like a long-term champion.
Yeah.
So as much as I do agree, it's on fire. You want to let it play out. But if Jan wins that fight, I mean, there's not a ton of options for him next. There is, but in terms of fresh matchups and fights that feel like they will go any different if they were to be a first time, it's basically Dillashaw's the only fight, really.
And that for you, I think that was a fight that you said you have to see this year, wasn't it? Jan versus Dillashaw.
It's the fight that I'm the most interested in seeing this year.
Yeah. Man.
Number 7. Israel Adesanya, the long-reigning middleweight champion, will be back this Saturday in a main event spot against Robert Whittaker. Dominic, we've seen a lot of great performances out of Israel Adesanya, no doubt, and he's win or lose on Saturday. I believe he will continue to have great performances in the future.
Yeah.
But we haven't really talked a lot about Adesanya on the podcast, so I saw question. I saw it brought up, and I was like, you know what? He's fighting this Saturday.
Yeah.
Right now, what would you say is the best performance of Israel Adesanya's UFC career?
This might come as a surprise to some people, but Noah, that fight of the year, one of the best fights of all time against Kelvin Gastelum, is one of the best performances for me from Israel Adesanya. And you're probably thinking, and maybe listeners are thinking, huh? That fight was tit for tat. Kelvin Gastelum had him injured in that fight. That's why I like it even more, because I love when a fighter can face adversity and not just face it, but then just come out from out of it and get the victory, man. That was such a, scratching and clawing, just one of the most closely contested bouts I've ever seen. But then in the final round, he's dropping dropping Kelvin Gastelum like 3 times in one round. I mean, the fact that he was able to withstand so much damage, keep going for 5 rounds, never really whimper, never really get tired. He has that all-timer where the camera pans to him and he goes, I'm willing to die going into that 5th round. And damn, if that doesn't just put goosebumps up my ass, I don't know what does. Because, that fight to me, man, is so amazing. That's what really kind of made me feel like, okay, this guy, he was beating everyone pretty easily, before that, Israel was. But then that one really flipped a switch for me where, like, this guy is a champion material, a long-standing champion, and that's what he is now, 3 title defenses, looking to make it 4 on Saturday.
Well, I appreciate you giving that answer, Dominic, but you're actually wrong. There's only one clear answer to this question, and it's the Yoel Romero fight. And I can't do it. I can't. I was going to try to, completely just
you were gonna
that the whole time, but I can't do it. That fight is such a turd sandwich.
It's the shit sandwich, right? That was from way back.
$1 million pieces of bread. And then you just have a fat shit in the middle of it. That is him versus Yoel Romero. Another story for another time.
Yeah.
You actually kind of took my answer. I was, and again,
really
surprised you went with it. Yeah. To me, it's about what he battled through in that fight. Yeah. Kelvin Gastelum, I probably value higher than most at this point. His stock's not at its highest. I get that. But for Kelvin to be such a tough guy in his own right, he's been a guy who had fought a lot of high-level competition even at that time. And for Izzy to, yes, of course, he did not go in there and dominate that fight, but I don't know if people were really expecting him to back then. But I thought it was more impressive that he took damage, that he had to battle through that adversity to get to what he ultimately wanted, interim title. but it was a title, right? So
yeah.
he said he was willing to die for that second place trophy.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm being facetious, but the fight though that I think if I were to give another answer and say like this is the best performance of Adesanya's career, I mean, God, he has really had like some fantastic performances. I mean, it is tough to pick one.
I mean, Derek Brunson stands out to me.
To me, the two there's two that were on a big stage where it's like, okay,
yeah,
is it his title winning performance against Robert Whittaker the first time, or is it the Paulo Costa fight?
Of course,
both, fantastic performances. Now, I'm one of those guys that thought Paulo Costa was going to win that fight. So
that's true. Yeah,
egg on my face, but. A part of me would kind of prevent. So, like, another thing, or another reason why I felt like the Kelvin Gastelum fight was the one, was that was like the best version of Kelvin Gastelum we'd ever seen.
Yes.
And Izzy still took it to him, ultimately wins that fight with it all on the line in round 5, had like nearly a 10-8 probably. Just a awesome fight. But when it came to Paulo and Robert Whittaker, I felt like that was like the worst version of both those guys.
Mm-hmm.
And you can credit that to Izzy, but I don't know.
Izzy effect.
I think so my answer is going to be Paulo Costa. And because I think that Izzy effect that you used to trademark back in the early days.
Yeah.
I think that was more at play for why Paulo looked so deer in the headlights, looked so sluggish. Yeah, he can say whatever, I drank wine before, whatever.
Yeah.
I think he got into that cage, the bell rings, and he goes, oh my God, I'm going up against the literal Matrix.
No shit.
He had no answer immediately. He was a deer in headlights, nowhere to go, and he got pieced apart for a round and a half. Yeah. Robert Whittaker admitted that he got over emotional in that fight against Izzy, that he let the moment kind of the pressure rest on his shoulders a little too closely, that the moment was too big for him. It's the biggest live crowd in UFC history, by the way, the most fans in attendance. He admitted that it was like too much pressure. He got over emotional. And I didn't really look at that fight and go, oh, that's the Izzy effect. Because Robert came out and was super like pressure heavy,
very aggressive.
And really he kind of just like served it up to Izzy, hook, line, and sinker. While for Paulo Costa, it was like clearly Izzy's games had really, from second one of that Costa fight, Izzy was just on another level.
Yeah, he was.
Number 8. Dominic, here's an interesting hypothetical here. Saw this one proposed. There were actual fighters attached to this question, but I figured it'd be better if we just took them out and, discussed openly. So question, Dominic, who do you give a title fight to first? A fighter coming off a loss but has wins in the division, or a fighter coming off a win but has never fought in the division previously?
Man, this one's just all sloppy and ugly, because I immediately, like in my head, I want to say, well, damn it, if you're coming off a loss, you shouldn't be fighting for a damn belt. But then you look at the Petr Yan and Corey Sandhagen fight. And
both guys coming off losses.
Exactly. Both guys coming off losses. And it was my fight of the year for 2021. But still, I'm going to lean toward that sentiment anyway. I think, outside of that special circumstance, justifying someone, coming in off a loss, regardless of having wins in that division for a title, it's very hard. And at least, when a fighter is coming off a win, it's usually because they more than likely have like a bigger name, so they're changing divisions, they're going to go try and get a double belt or so on and so forth, Henry Cejudo, whatever the case may be. I always like seeing someone getting a win and then a title fight to follow rather than losing and getting a title.
So you're going with the win, but has never been in a division.
Yes. And we've seen that so much too.
Yeah, I mean, again, you could pick and choose. Like, hey, here's an example: the Sandhagen-Jan fight.
Yeah.
I loved that fight. I thought it was awesome that we got made. Obviously, it was one of the best fights of the year. But, you know, if you just looked at it on paper and went, yeah, you got two guys coming off losses here fighting for a belt, you'd be like, huh? That's why context kind of matters here.
Yeah, for sure.
So basically, I look at it like, let's say, you know how close that decision was between Dillashaw and Sandhagen?
Yeah, insane.
Let's say Dillashaw had lost that fight, but he's still lined up to the point like his layoff and everything going on right now. So let's just say one judge scored it the other way, or two. I don't know if it was a split, but whatever. So let's say right now, as it stands, Corey Sandhagen won that fight. He already got his chance at an interim title, lost. Let's say Peter Yan wins, and UFC's like, we're going to book Peter Yan versus TJ Dillashaw next. Would you be in bigger support of that title fight or Henry Cejudo coming back and fighting Alexander Volkanovski?
I would go the Cejudo route. I would.
I would too. I think I would. Even though, again, Jan Dillashaw is my most anticipated fight.
It's such a badass fight, yes.
But at the same time, it's so weird because, like, I remember watching that fight live, that being Sandhagen Dillashaw, and I think I scored it for Corey. But the fact that Dillashaw got the win put enough confidence in me to be like, him and Jan is a fight.
Yeah.
But if one judge goes the other way, it's not my most anticipated fight of the year. That's why judging matters, people. Because people like me are easily manipulated into that kind of shit. But.
Yeah, that Sandhagen-Dillashaw fight was one of the closest fights I've ever watched live in my life. It was crazy.
Yeah, that's so true. So true. Number 9.
A little fun here. We've actually discussed this before, technically.
Yeah.
But not on our show.
If you would like to check out where we discussed this, it was on an episode of our good friends over at the Barely Critical Movie Review podcast. One of their earlier episodes on the cinema classic that was Here Comes the Boom, starring Kevin James.
That's right.
And we talked about this on that episode. So, Dominic, you've had more time to think about it, since that.
Yeah.
If you were a fighter, what would your walkout song be?
Yeah, complete opposite from what it was back in the day on that show. That show really hit me a lot of different angles. Didn't foresee a lot of the conversations on there, and it led me to choose a pretty interesting song, but I'm not going to spoil it on here. You got to go show the boys some love and listen to find out what it was. But more serious this time around for sure, more legit, a song that I'm like big on right now. And I guess we've never really discussed music much on this show, but Noah knows I'm one of the biggest Post Malone fans in the world. Like, I love everything about the guy. I love all his music. And there's a song that I've been big on this year, even though he hasn't had an album in 2 years. That's like my mantra for 2022 almost. I'm going with On the Road from Post Malone featuring Lil Baby and Meek Mill. I think it's just a real good motivation song. It's kind of like, pressing forward, not letting, fake friends get in the way, nothing to stop you from achieving the dreams and the goals you set out for yourself. It's got a really upbeat tune, some good raps from all three fellas. And there's also a line in there that I really love, talking about taking a shit and there's plaques on the wall. And I just love that line. But that's the song I'm going, On the Road, Post Malone.
Old Posty.
Yes.
Dominic's dude. Yeah, that's great, Dominic. I'm glad that you have that kind of song to get you out of bed in the morning, to make that walk to the cage. You're like, that's right. I also shit and look at my plaques on the wall.
That's right, yes.
And I'm going to follow you here. I'm going to follow your lead. I'm going to give a song that's also going to give those same emotions. That's going to, motivate someone.
Yeah.
That's going
light a fire under your
inspire somebody, including myself.
Yeah.
But it's going to take a little turn because here's why.
Oh, boy.
Some of the best walkouts of all time, Dominic, are when you have a song that people know and can sing along to.
Yes. Darren Till comes to mind immediately, by the way.
Yep. And I want to be a fighter. I don't just fight in the United States. I want to go to Fight Island, baby. I want to go to Brazil.
You're worldwide. Yes.
I want to fight in all the countries.
Global.
Because of that, there's a lot of non-English speakers. So you got to,
True.
I don't know. I'm not bilingual. So I got to let the music be my language.
Yeah.
And if there's one song that any language
Man, you're building this up a
can
lot.
sing along to,
Yeah.
it is the classic by the Champs called Tequila.
Wait, is that what you chose on the Barely Critical as well?
No. I don't
Okay,
think so.
I couldn't remember.
So,
I like it.
a song with literally one word that gets said over and over again. It don't matter what language. It don't matter if you speak wingdings. You can say, enunciate tequila.
I like it.
So
I
because
like
of
that motivates you, Noah. I like that gets you out of bed in the morning.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that part. Yeah. It does that too. If anything,
Tequila puts you to bed.
I was gonna say that, but I don't fuck with tequila. So, but for the song purposes, I do because it's gonna bring the nation together through my fighting ability.
You are going to become everyone's favorite fighter. I mean, everybody's going to be singing and clapping along, and everybody's going to go all at once. Tequila. Can you imagine 20,000 screaming fans saying that at one time?
I just can't even imagine like John Anik being like, hyping up the fight. He's like the tail of the tape, whatever, and then it's me coming out. And it's just I
love it. Yeah.
Number 10.
10th final already.
So again, I took out the fighters involved in this question, but this involved. Yeah, you're slipping
too quick. Sorry.
So there was a fight that was the fight of the night. Awesome fight that we saw last Saturday between Julian Erosa and Steven Peterson. Now, this question, where I saw it, it mentioned that fight specifically, but in terms of what this question really got boiled down to, I don't necessarily think that fight fits. As good of a fight as it was, as fun as it was, I don't think Erosa versus Peterson is a fight of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, the question was, Dominic, do sloppy brawls deserve to be discussed for fight of the year? Fights that are entertaining for the amount of output and the durability shown by both fighters, but completely lack any and all defense.
Yeah, I'm going to go yes. I'm a sucker for some sloppy brawls here and again. And, truthfully, what leads me to that, and it's funny because, the fight of the year, again, I already said this for 2021 for me, was Futuryan versus Corey Sandhagen, which is one of the most technical five-round
probably
MMA
the most
bouts.
highly skilled technical fight of 2021.
Yeah, and that's what took the cake for me. But here I am justifying, you know what? Give me a sloppy brawl here or there. And that's because, Noah, I view Justin Gaethje and Michael Chandler as a sloppy brawl, if I'm being honest. A little bit cleaner than Julian Erosa and Steven Peterson, for what it's worth. But, I mean, at the end of the day, that's kind of how I viewed that fight. And it was awesome, by the way. Don't get me wrong. And that's why I think, it doesn't have to be the biggest name guys. It doesn't have to be the tit for tat, the kicks, the elbows, the crisp right hands. I think it can be sloppy. I think it can be blood and guts, war. And it's that idea of two guys or girls, by the way, leaving it all in the cage at the end of that when that horn sounds. And that's what matters to me most for the fight of the year discussions.
You might be right about Gaethje Chandler, but I was thinking more of that fight in the PFL championship.
Bruno Capoloza and Ante Dilia too.
Yep. That fight, to me, it didn't end up on our top 4 for fight of the year, but it was the last one cut.
Yeah, it was right there. Yeah.
And it was on most surprising fight of the year. So
yes.
Basically, yes. My answer to this question is yes. You don't see as many sloppy brawls nowadays because the skill level's just gotten so refined. I mean, look at Forrest Griffin versus Stephan Bonner. That's considered one of the best fights of all time.
Yep.
The sloppiest of brawls. I mean, no defense. No combination that you put together twice. I mean, these guys were just throwing leather and just trying to make the other guy quit. That was, I mean, awesome fight. The fight that saved the company. Awesome durability, intense show of heart. But again, it's sloppy, not the most skilled fight in the world.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of those in the history of the company, and I think there's a place for that.
Yes.
You don't see it as much nowadays because, again, the skill level's gotten to such a level that even in divisions like heavyweight, you got guys like Ciryl Gane and Francis Ngannou and Stipe having complete skill sets nowadays. But man, every once in a while when you get in that rock'em sock'em robot type fight where two guys just stand in the middle and they just throw at one another, that it just puts a smile on my face. And maybe Gaethje Chandler is that fight. It's about as much of that fight as you can get nowadays. Like, it's still highly skilled, but sloppy in the sense of, like, they kind of threw caution to the wind, especially Michael Chandler, and said, fuck it, let's have a fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, that sweet spot right in the middle is a little bit of Jan Sandhagen. We pull some of that in. We pull some of, Gaethje Chandler, mix that together, and you're working with a masterpiece, Because, again, you kind of said we don't see many sloppy brawls, which is true. You don't see as many these days, like, the Bonner versus Griffin. But we still don't see a ton of, like, the Jan Sandhagens either, It's like
That's true.
You get right in the middle,
It's a
mixture.
Tough. It's tough because I think, and this might be a hot take, I think the average fight in the UFC is closer to being Jan versus Sandhagen than being Gaethje versus Chandler or Bonner versus Griffin
or
like
Erosa versus Peterson.
Again, the skill level
has
hit a point where most fights, even ones that are a little dull, again, Strickland or Manson was a bit of a dull fight. But you could still appreciate the skill that Sean Strickland really showed in that fight.
Yes.
And a fight I thought of when you're talking about sloppy brawls? A one-rounder, all-timer, Chet Congo versus Pat Barry is one.
Holy shit. That fight.
That's a fight. Hey, that's a fight. Like, if I had money on Chet Congo, that's me reffing that fight. Yes. I'm like, oh, he's still moving a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
just thought that was a good one to mention here as well. But yeah, I think maybe there's even more to this discussion, Dominic, because really it's just there's no like there's not like a list or like a criteria for what makes a great fight.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite fight of 2021 was a one-sided beatdown for the most part.
Volkanovski
Ortega.
Yeah.
But that's not, if you just look at it at that face value, you're kind of like, why? But you just have to watch the fight.
It's those moments,
The moments, Ortega nearly coming from out of nowhere to finish that fight in the third round, multiple submission attempts, Volkanovski having to hold on, fight out of them, really tight against one of the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners in the UFC.
Yeah.
And I mean, the amount of, again, heart, durability Ortega showed is scary in that fight. And the amount of skill Volkanovski had, and he's like, why won't you just die? Like, just, it's like, it tells such an amazing story. But that's why, like, there's no recipe for what makes a great fight. Like, yes, you get two highly skilled opponents and you hope that you get a Jan versus Sandhagen every time out. But sometimes we were at one time, Dominic, I don't know if I can stand by it anymore, but we were one time a proponent of the no crowds for the UFC fights.
We were.
But I've seen fights that have been improved upon by the crowd and also lessened. Just going to mention the fight that went after Gaethje versus Chandler.
Yep.
Billy Q and Shane Burgos, the crowd was completely dead for it because they were just exhausted from what they had just seen. And because of that fight doesn't get the credit it deserves, the love it deserves. So you had two guys fighting their asses off, but if the fans didn't buy into it, then you just kind of are like, well, that was really good. But if the fans were as into that fight as they were for Gaethje Chandler, we'd be like probably debating which one was better that night,
Yeah, 100%. Because on any other card, that fight does get fight of the night. You know what I mean? So it's crazy.
And then there's kind of the thing that we always struggle with at the end of the year, not to keep this conversation.
No, you're
fine. It's
fine.
an interesting discussion. And I think we both tend to agree on this. We tend to evaluate for fight of the year. If a fight goes 5 rounds or 3 rounds, it goes to the decision. We tend to put those higher than Yuri Prohaska versus Dominic Reyes, which was an amazing war, but it only went 2 rounds.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I'm not
that's
sure.
That's very true.
And it's like, is that fair? Like, I don't know. For someone, they're like, why would I, holding my attention for 25 minutes, for 15 minutes with no knockout, no submission is not my thing. I would rather watch a fight that gets ended in 7 minutes and a brutal knockout. Like, I love knockouts. I love submissions, but in fight of the year discussions, I always tend to view higher the epics, the Godfathers of the Citizen Kanes of MMA for that year. They're long, like when you're looking at like movies, it's like they're long. Lord of the Rings trilogy, that kind of stuff, where it's like they're long, but they're worth it. You may not watch them all the time, but when you do, you're like, man, that is a damn good fight.
Yeah, as a fan, of course I love the knockouts, I love the submissions, and maybe that's why they don't come into play in the fight of the year discussions, is because at the end of the day, there is a convincing winner. They stopped their opponent, but these ones that go 3 rounds, that go 5 rounds, you're on the edge of your seat. You're waiting. Something's going to happen. Someone's going to get knocked out. And then they get knocked down, but the fight doesn't get finished. They get back up and they storm back across the cage, and you're like, holy shit, what is going on? And then it does go to the judges' scorecards. And even sometimes we get so lucky to where you have no idea who even won that fight. So then it makes it even more fun. So I think that does play the biggest factor, but it is something worth mentioning, especially like, what if there is a fight that a championship fight, for example, it's 2-2. It's close for 4 rounds, but then there's a finish in the 5th. Does that maybe squeak in there for the fight of the year discussion?
I mean, if we were doing this podcast in 2019, Usman versus Covington probably would have been up there.
Right. Yeah, very true.
And that's also a fight that kind of a sloppy brawl, if I'm being honest.
And that was the 2 top dogs in the division,
Yeah, just at the time, not very refined strikers, and they had a kickboxing fight, 2 wrestlers, and it was awesome. I mean, there's totally a place for that. Give me that every week.
Exactly.
Give me that. Give me Jan
rounds.
Sandhagen. Like, I'll take all of it.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I know you just love MMA, Noah. You love the fighting. Holy shit.
I do. And I love you, Dominic. And this is going to wrap it up. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Reddit Roundtable. Give us your thoughts on all these questions we posed. I'd really love to hear, what you guys think. Really appreciate. We reached 100 subscribers as of yesterday, I guess, when you're seeing this. So shout out to you guys for subscribing to the YouTube channel. If you're listening on Spotify, you can keep listening to us there, but feel free to come subscribe to the YouTube channel.
We got content here.
The Nosebleeds, our betting show that's only on YouTube. So, there's stuff on here for you if you want to do both. You can listen to the podcast on Spotify, watch the betting show on YouTube. We even got clips now for our podcast, which best decision I think we ever made. I think our growth, I think that's what really skyrocketed us to this 100 is introducing clips. So shout out to Dom for that one. But Dominic, here's to the next 100 more and the 100 after that. I don't have a drink, but it's cheers.
Okay. Yeah.
But we'll be back on Friday. Weekend preview, UFC 271, Adesanya versus Whitaker 2, Derek Lewis versus Tai Tuivasa.
Holy shit. Cannonier Brunson? Good
Brunson.
Card.
Really good card. But until then, Dominic, tell the good people where they can find you on social media.
Find me on Twitter, on Instagram, at DSleaf14. More importantly, go follow, go engage, go interact with the podcast on Twitter, on Instagram, at BAJ_MMA podcast. That's it.
I'm going to let you do my outro.
I have to outro you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, to the right of me on my screen, Noah Baker can be followed on Twitter, on Instagram, at ntbaker_. If you go to the bio, the link in his bio on those social media platforms, there's a link tree. Okay. And it's a really cool link. It's got Spotify. It's got Apple. It's got Google. It doesn't have Google anymore, but you get where I'm going with it. It has YouTube. It's got our Anchor links. Shout out to Anchor, the sponsor for the podcast. There's one link, Noah, where they can leave a voice message for the show. Send us in your questions, your hot takes, your opinions, the answers to these questions you want answered on the next roundtable, predictions, what you had for lunch, what you had for dinner, anything. We just want to hear from you. And there's a link on there where you can donate to the podcast, leave a monthly contribution. Any and all support is appreciated. But that's it, Noah. You're not going to say anything here? Nothing at all? Okay. That's it. We're out. And we'll see you guys Friday for the UFC 271 preview.
Good job, Dom.